Welcome back to Hopetales, where every story reminds us that even in the darkest nights, a single act of courage can bring back the light. Tonight, we're taking you to the rain-soaked streets of Chicago. A routine night patrol turned into a rescue that changed one little girl's life and uncovered something far more sinister. This is the night shift that saved her, a story of courage, humanity, and hope that refuses to die. Chicago's streets were wrapped in darkness, the city holding its breath under a blanket of fog and scattered streetlights. Rain from the previous night had left puddles that mirrored the faint glows of the amber lamps above, creating a distorted pattern of light on the cracked asphalt. Patrol cars moved in the distance, but the neighborhood seemed frozen in time, silent except for the occasional hum of a distant engine, or the wind whispering through the alleys. Officer Jake Matthews moved slowly in his patrol car, headlights slicing through the dimness, sweeping across empty sidewalks and shuttered buildings. His senses were alert, trained to notice anomalies that might escape a casual observer. The night was uneventful, as far as it appeared, but he had learned that the city often concealed danger beneath layers of routine. At a junction where the alley narrowed between two brick buildings, his ears picked up a faint sound. At first it seemed like the wind or perhaps a stray cat, but the subtle irregularity drew him out of the car, compelling him to investigate. He parked and stepped onto the wet asphalt, the soles of his boots clicking softly against the puddles. The sound grew more distinct, soft, irregular, and unmistakably human. A small figure huddled at the far end of the alley became visible under the dim light of a flickering lamp. A little girl crouched against the wall, arms wrapped around her knees, shaking slightly. Her face was streaked with dirt and tear marks, eyes wide and alert, scanning the shadows as if anticipating danger. Each sob was a ripple in the stillness, a thread pulling the attention of the lone officer closer. Jake moved carefully, keeping low, careful not to startle the child. Every instinct screamed caution. Every training drilled patience. The alley was narrow, lined with garbage bins and broken crates, shadows sharp against the bricks. He slowed, making each step deliberate, projecting a calm presence while scanning for any hidden threat. The first details of the situation became apparent. The ground around the girl was disturbed. A torn doll lay nearby, trampled and covered in mud. Footprints, partially washed away by the remnants of rain, led toward a partially open garage door at the rear of the alley. This was no accident. Someone had left the girl here intentionally. Someone had wanted her hidden, vulnerable, alone. Jake crouched, careful not to cast a shadow over her, observing the way she pressed her small frame to the wall, trembling. He noted her posture, her tension, the way she glanced toward the darkness at the alley's edge. Time stretched, each second heavy with possibility and peril. The faintest hint of movement caught his eye from deeper within the alley. Footsteps, deliberate and controlled, echoed softly off the walls. The intruder had not anticipated the girl's escape, and now their path crossed with the officers. Jake positioned himself instinctively, keeping the girl behind him as he scanned the shadows. His hand hovered near the baton, senses sharp for any sudden motion. The figure emerged partially from the darkness, tall, confident, deliberate. Eyes darted toward the girl, then to the patrol car. The standoff lasted mere seconds, but each heartbeat seemed to stretch into eternity. The man assessed, weighed options, and then retreated into the shadows, disappearing from sight. The threat had not vanished, only postponed. Jake did not chase. His priority remained the safety of the child. He guided her toward the patrol car, careful to keep her low and close. Each step required patience, his body tense, ready for a sudden move, yet measured to avoid triggering fear. The child clung slightly to his side, small fingers brushing his coat, seeking reassurance from the calm authority he projected. The journey to the patrol car took a few minutes, each moment laden with potential danger. Overhead, the faint glow of the city's lights flickered through thin clouds, casting eerie shadows along the alley's walls. The girl's breathing remained uneven, each gasp revealing lingering terror, yet slowly beginning to calm in the presence of protection. Once inside the patrol car, Jake's attention did not waver. He kept a careful watch on the alley, scanning for any sign of the man who had just retreated. The city's night did not offer comfort. The shadows could conceal danger, and the child's vulnerability demanded vigilance. His hands gripped the wheel tightly, his eyes sweeping the mirrors, checking every angle, every reflection, every approaching sound. The drive to the police station was slow. Streets were empty, save for the occasional distant vehicle. Each red light, each corner could conceal potential risk. Yet the patrol car became a sanctuary for the small figure in the back seat, offering motion, warmth, and protection. Gradually, the girl's shoulders relaxed, her body responding to the presence of someone who would not harm her, someone who could shield her from the darkness that had stalked her through the alley. Arriving at the station, Jake guided her into the safe confines of Child Protective Services. The warmth of fluorescent lights replaced the cold air of the alley, and the sense of vulnerability began to dissipate. Gentle, trained hands took over, guiding the girl toward safety, slowly building trust through calm, reassurance, and measured care. Even as the girl began to feel security, Jake's mind remained on the alley. The small space had exposed a glimpse of a larger network shadows, operating in the city's underbelly, exploiting the vulnerable. One small cry, unnoticed by most, had revealed a dark secret. One night shift officer, vigilant and patient, had become the first line of defense against a looming threat. Outside the walls of the station, Chicago's night carried on. The streets seemed peaceful once more, as if nothing had occurred. But within the quiet, in that alley, and in the patrol car that had navigated the empty streets, courage had acted silently. The city had continued its rhythm unaware, yet in one small encounter, the balance between danger and safety had shifted. The alley remained behind them, dark and silent. The child, though still shaken, had survived. The night shift had delivered vigilance, patience, and protection. The first step in unraveling a greater threat had begun, a quiet heroism unnoticed by the sleeping city, yet profound in its impact. This was a night that would remain in memory. A night when small courage exposed a big evil. The girl's faint sobs echoed inside the patrol car as the rain outside softened to a mist. Officer Jake Matthews glanced in the rear view mirror. Her tiny frame trembled under a police blanket, eyes wide and hollow. He drove slowly through the deserted Chicago streets, wipers swaying like a metronome, counting the seconds since he'd found her. At first, he thought it was just another runaway. But something about the alley, the broken chain on the gate, the discarded cell phones, the faint smell of gasoline told a different story. The kind of story that hides in the corners of big cities and waits for no one to look. He radioed in the incident, giving the location in a calm, professional tone, though his pulse raced. The operator's reply came through the static, a name he recognized. Detective Ruiz. Special Victims Unit. That name alone meant one thing: the girl wasn't just lost. She had escaped. The patrol car reached a small hospital downtown. Inside the fluorescent-lit emergency bay, nurses moved quickly, wrapping the child in warm sheets. She didn't speak, just stared at the rain tracing down the window. Her wrists bore faint bruises, her feet were bare. One nurse whispered something to Jake, a look passed between them. The kind that says, "This is bigger than you think." Jake stepped out, leaning against the cold brick wall outside the hospital. The city hummed around him, alive yet indifferent. Across the street, a flicker of movement, a black SUV idling under a flickering streetlight. Its tinted windows hid whoever sat inside, watching. A drop of rain hit Jake's cap. He turned slightly, pretending not to notice, and took a slow step toward his car. The SUV's headlights dimmed then, without a sound, it rolled away into the fog. He noted the plates, half visible, half hidden by the drizzle. He memorized what he could and called it in. Dispatch confirmed what he feared. The plates were fake. Inside, the girl was now under observation, a doctor explaining her condition to social services. Jake caught a glimpse of the small bracelet on her wrist, a cheap plastic band with faded letters, maybe once spelling a name. It had been cut halfway through, as if torn off in a hurry. That night, Jake couldn't go home. The image of her sitting silently in that alley refused to leave his mind. He pulled up surveillance footage from nearby shops. One camera, barely working, showed a shadowy van pulling into the same alley just hours before he'd found her. Another figure unloading crates, opening the door for a group of children, one of them stumbling. The timestamp froze at 1:52 a.m. Jake paused the footage. The girl must have escaped minutes later. He replayed it again, each frame slower than the last. The van's logo, blurred by rain, showed faint letters. Morris Freight Co. He checked the company name in the database. It didn't exist. Not anymore. Shut down 5 years ago after financial fraud. He leaned back, rain still tapping on his car roof. Fraud was a polite word for what was really happening. Hours later, near dawn, he drove back to the alley, crime scene tape fluttering where the darkness had been thicker the night before. He stepped inside carefully. The puddles still glistened. His flashlight traced fresh tire marks near the back gate. Large, heavy tread, matching commercial vans. Behind a rusted dumpster, he found something small, a child's backpack, soaked but still intact. Inside, there were scribbled papers, a crayon drawing of a house with the word home written in shaky handwriting. Jake swallowed hard, his breath misting in the cold air. He turned the backpack over. Inside a torn side pocket, a fragment of paper stuck out, part of a business card. Only 2 words legible. South Dock. Jake knew the place, an abandoned freight area by Lake Michigan. Closed years ago. Few lights, no cameras. The kind of place where people could disappear. He closed his notebook, raindrops smearing the ink. The dawn began to break, pale light spilling over the city's skyline. He drove slowly toward the docks, engine humming like a whisper in the fog. Chicago's early morning calm belied the danger waiting near the lake. Broken cranes loomed like skeletons. Water slapped against the pier, rhythmic and cold. Jake parked the car at a distance and watched through binoculars. There, movement inside one of the old warehouses. 2 men, hooded, loading something into a van identical to the one from the footage. He could barely make out boxes labeled with fake company seals. Then a glimpse, a small figure led by the arm, stumbling. Another child. Jake's hands tightened on the steering wheel. He took a breath, called for backup, and waited. But something in him refused to sit still. Rain thickened again, blurring the glass. He stepped out quietly, hand resting on his holster, heart steady. The alley girl's face flashed before him, the fear, the silence, the spark of life that refused to die even in the darkest night. He moved closer, blending with the shadows of the shipping containers. A shout echoed faintly from inside. The men were arguing. A door slammed. A truck engine coughed to life. Jake positioned himself behind a stack of crates, eyes fixed on the van. The warehouse lights flickered like they were struggling against the storm. One of the men stepped out, scanning the lot. The city, in its restless heartbeat, seemed to hold its breath. And then, a sudden flash of red and blue tore through the dawn fog. Sirens wailed, echoing across the docks. The van screeched, trying to flee, but backup units had already closed in from both ends. Jake moved forward through the chaos, rain soaking through his jacket, adrenaline flooding every vein. The suspects were cornered, hands raised. Inside the warehouse, 2 more children huddled in the shadows, scared, but alive. As the officers secured the scene, Jake stood by the open doorway, staring at the gray horizon over Lake Michigan. The rain washed the blood and dirt from the pavement, as if the city itself wanted to cleanse its scars. It wasn't over yet. He knew this was just the beginning, the surface of something much darker. But for now, 3 lives were safe, because 1 girl had found the courage to run, and 1 man on a quiet night shift had listened. The next morning broke gray and heavy over Chicago. The storm had passed, but its echo lingered. Puddles shimmered on cracked streets, and the city seemed quieter than usual, as if it, too, was trying to process what had happened. Officer Jake Matthews stood in the precinct briefing room, raincoat folded over one arm, eyes fixed on the evidence board now filled with photos and printouts. The girl's case had become an operation. What began as a simple rescue had opened the door to something deeper. A trafficking network operating in silence beneath the city's noise. Detective Ruiz pointed at the photos pinned across the board. Shipping containers, warehouse maps, and a logo that appeared on the side of every seized crate. Morris Freight Co. It wasn't just 1 abandoned warehouse. There were 4 more across the industrial belt, all registered under false names. Jake's heart sank. How many more children had vanished without a sound? He stepped into the evidence room, the fluorescent lights buzzing faintly overhead. On a metal table lay the soaked backpack he'd found in the alley. Forensics had recovered faint fingerprints, more than 1 set. 1 belonged to the rescued girl. The others were unknown. He traced his fingers along the backpack's torn edges. Inside, a folded scrap of lined paper had been found, its ink blurred by rain. Only a few words remained legible. Truck, Thursday at 6 p.m. S-Dock. Thursday, that was today. Jake didn't speak. He didn't need to. The decision was already made. He would return to the docks before nightfall. The afternoon light dimmed early, clouds thickening again. Jake sat alone in his patrol car near the old industrial road, the radio silent except for occasional static. The streets here were empty, forgotten by most of the city. Rusted fences lined the road, and the wind carried the scent of oil and salt from the lake. At 5:47 p.m., movement caught his eye, a convoy of 2 white trucks pulling slowly into the fenced yard of one of the warehouses. No company logos this time, just blank panels, freshly painted. He reached for his notepad, jotting down partial license numbers. Then he zoomed his dash camera toward the gate. A man stepped out of the truck tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a reflective vest, pretending to be part of a delivery crew. 2 more followed. They unloaded wooden crates and rolled them inside. Everything was too quiet. Jake turned off his headlights and waited. Rain began to fall again, soft at first, then heavier, blurring the view. He adjusted the lens on his camera, watching faint shapes move inside the warehouse. Then a flicker, a small light near a side door. A shadow passed by, smaller than the rest. Another child. Jake's jaw tightened. He sent the coordinates through his phone, alerting Ruiz and the task force. The message delivered. Then he waited, every second stretching longer than the last. Thunder rolled in the distance. Lightning flashed across the lake. Inside the warehouse, men began loading something into the trucks again. Jake could see the faint outlines movement under tarps. The image was hauntingly familiar. 6:08 p.m. Sirens were still minutes away. The convoy was about to move. Jake stepped out of his car, blending with the shadows as rain drenched his uniform. He stayed low, moving toward the side of the building. Through a crack in the metal siding, he saw inside dim lights, stacked crates, and children huddled in a corner, watched by a man pacing with a phone in his hand. Jake exhaled slowly. Every instinct told him to wait, to let backup handle it. But there were minutes, maybe seconds before those trucks disappeared again. He moved quietly toward the rear door. Rain masked his footsteps. The door was chained, but weakly. One firm push would break it. He counted the seconds. The rhythm of thunder above, masking the faint sound of his breath. Then a faint metallic clink behind him. He froze. A flashlight beam swept across the rain. Another guard. The man turned the light toward the warehouse. Unaware, Jake was inches away in the dark. In a single silent motion, Jake moved past him, slipping into the building's shadow before the man turned back. Inside, the air was thick with dust and fear. He crouched behind stacked crates, scanning the room. 2 guards near the main truck, one by the door, the man on the phone gesturing angrily. And the children, 5 of them, their faces pale, their hands bound with rope. Jake looked up. A metal platform ran across the ceiling, overlooking the floor below. He climbed quietly, one rung at a time, until he reached the top. From here, he could see everything. Below, the phone man barked orders, pointing toward the truck. 2 guards began loading crates. One turned toward the children. Jake's hand reached for the emergency beacon on his vest. He pressed it once. A faint red blink silent signal sent to dispatch. Then came the first siren in the distance. The men below froze. Confusion. Shouts. The leader grabbed his phone again, screaming orders. Jake seized the moment, dropped from the platform to the crates below, landing hard but steady. The guards turned, startled, reaching for their weapons, but the door burst open before they could move. Blue and red light flooded the room. The echo of boots, the flash of badges, the thunder of commands. Jake shielded the children, guiding them toward the open door as Ruiz's team swept the warehouse. The suspects tried to flee through the back, but the alley was already sealed. Within minutes, it was over. Rain poured through the open door, mixing with tears and relief. The children clung to each other, too shocked to speak. One of them, a small boy, reached out, the same torn bracelet on his wrist that Jake had seen before. They were connected. The girl he saved had not run alone. She had come back to find them. Jake stood in the rain, sirens fading behind him. The city lights shimmered across the wet pavement, painting the scene in reflections of red and blue. He looked toward the lake, calm now, the storm finally breaking apart over the horizon. He knew this wasn't the end. More names would surface, more doors would open. But tonight something had shifted. A single cry in the dark had become a chain of rescue, and the officer who listened had lit a small flame in a city full of shadows. Dawn returned to Chicago with pale light washing over wet rooftops. The storm had left behind silence, the kind that feels like a city catching its breath. The docks were still cordoned off, police tape fluttering gently in the cold wind. Broken crates lay scattered, sirens had faded, and the faint hum of boats on Lake Michigan echoed in the distance. Officer Jake Matthews stood by the shoreline, jacket soaked, watching the water shimmer with early sunlight. He hadn't slept. The night's events replayed. Behind his tired eyes, the faces of the rescued children, the fear in their eyes slowly giving way to disbelief, then to relief. The case was officially labeled a successful rescue operation, but for Jake, it wasn't just another file in the department's archive. It was personal. Because behind those official words were the quiet moments. No report could capture a trembling hand gripping his sleeve, a child's first breath of freedom, the sound of rain washing away footprints of fear. He walked back toward the makeshift shelter where the children were being cared for. Inside, nurses and volunteers moved softly, their voices calm, their presence gentle. A few children slept under warm blankets, their small chests rising and falling steadily. Others sat quietly, holding cups of hot cocoa, staring out the window at the soft drizzle. Among them, Jake saw a familiar face, the girl from the alley. She was sitting by the window, tracing the fog on the glass with her finger, sketching shapes only she could understand. When she noticed him at the doorway, she didn't move, just tilted her head slightly, her eyes reflecting both recognition and gratitude. Jake nodded once silent acknowledgement of what she'd started. In the corner of the room, a CPS officer filled out paperwork. One of the doctors handed Jake a report. All 5 children were stable, none severely injured. It was a rare kind of miracle in his line of work. But as he read, he noticed something. The names listed didn't match any records of missing persons from the city. These children hadn't been lost here. They'd been brought here. A shiver passed through him. This wasn't just a local ring. It was part of something that reached beyond state lines. The Morris Freight Co. was only one mask among many. He stepped outside again into the soft drizzle. The street beyond the shelter was alive now. Commuters, buses, a city resuming its rhythm as if nothing had happened. But Jake knew better. Somewhere in those passing crowds, there were others, people unaware of how close darkness had crept the night before. He leaned against the patrol car, his reflection rippling in the rainwater pooled on the asphalt. The siren light was off now, but its faint reflection still danced across the puddles, red, then blue, then gone. Across the street, a journalist was filming a news report. Her words were drowned by the noise of the city, but Jake caught fragments. Heroic night shift, rescue near South Dock, saved 6 children from an organized network. He looked away. Heroism wasn't the word he'd choose. It was instinct. A decision made in silence, when no one was watching. Hours later, back at the precinct, the board that once showed scattered clues now formed a web of connections. The investigation had expanded. New warrants were issued, new arrests made. The team had uncovered foreign accounts, shell companies, and routes stretching across 3 states. The storm that started in one, Chicago Alley, had begun to spread light across much darker places. Jake pinned a new photo on the board, a grainy picture of the alley, where it all began. Below it, a handwritten note. Listen when the world goes quiet. Because that night, he had done exactly that. As the day faded into golden evening, Jake drove back to the lakefront. The rain had stopped, and the sky glowed with orange and pink hues. Waves lapped gently against the shore, as if erasing the last traces of the night before. He took a deep breath, letting the wind hit his face. The sound of distant gulls echoing through the air. He remembered the girl's drawing from her backpack, a crayon, sketch of a house under a bright sun, with the word home scrawled underneath. It was smudged, but hopeful. Now, she and the others had a chance to make that word real again. A car approached from behind. Detective Ruiz stepped out, carrying a small folder. He didn't speak, just handed Jake a sealed envelope. Inside was a photo, the children, smiling faintly in the shelter. The smallest one held a new stuffed toy. The girl stood beside her, her eyes still quiet, but no longer afraid. Jake looked at the photo for a long time, then folded it carefully and placed it inside his notebook. The wind picked up again, tugging at the edges of his coat. He gazed out at the horizon where sunlight touched the water, fragile, but persistent. He knew there would be more nights like that one. More alleys, more cries in the dark. But he also knew something else now. Courage wasn't about ending the darkness. It was about becoming the small, steady light inside it. The patrol car's radio crackled softly, another call. Another shift, another story waiting somewhere in the city. Jake slid behind the wheel, turned the key, and let the engine hum to life. As he drove away, the lake reflected the colors of a new day, pale gold and silver, scattered with streaks of light. And for the first time in years, Jake Matthews smiled, not because the world was